Daddy needs to be able to tell you what you need to do. Because if you try and do this whole Wall Street gambling bet of a cash grab, which was Batman v Superman, I'm gonna lose it. I don't like you guys. Just let me get in there. I'll do it all by myself. I'll learn how to code, whatever.
Don't piss off Daddy.
Don't anger Daddy, okay?
You gotta wait till Daddy gets home so he can make things right.
Yeah, you're gonna let me create a storyline, okay?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Caffeine Duck. I am your host, Gabriel Annan, and we are going to be talking about DC versus Marvel today. Today I have with me Connor and Drake, and these two will be on the hot seats because they're more the comic book fans than I am. So I'm ready to see everybody's feedback. Let's give a brief synopsis. Who are you guys, and what do you do? Starting with Connor.
What up? My name Connor. I go by Dan Mateo. You can find me on all platforms. I'm a music artist, but I'm also an avid lover of cinematography, movies, comics, gaming, all that stuff, and I just love to talk about it, so that's why I'm here.
My name is Drake, and I clean pools. That's it. That's literally all I do. That's my whole identity.
I keep them hydrated, if you know what I mean. A cup of water in there.
He keeps water in the big tub. Okay. Yeah, so DC versus Marvel, I already know that this is going to be kind of like a pretty emotional joyride for some people because like I'm not as attached to superheroes personally. It's not really my thing. I do have some input on it. How do you guys like what is the attraction to these like big superheroes for you guys?
So I can answer this right away, but Drake, do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
You're the guest for your first show, so feel free.
Sure. I'd say it goes beyond just the scope of imaginary characters because for me, not only growing up with these shows, it wasn't only fundamental to like the type of stuff that I watched as a kid, but it's fundamental to the reality of storytelling. No civilization exists outside of their storytelling and their history. If they don't have any history, they're just a wandering civilization with nothing to offer or give to the world because they don't remember anything, right? So for me, storytelling is quintessential in just about every facet of society, and especially good storytelling. It doesn't have to be always fiction. It can be nonfiction. The thing that does it for me is you must present good stories, you must have good material, and you have to be able to develop these characters in a way that seems relatable, yet also fun and engaging. And that's why I love superheroes, is because it's the mind's way of being like, how far can we really take storytelling? If we take all of the borders off, how far can we really take storytelling? That's what it is for me.
That's really interesting because you bring up something of like, all civilizations kind of have their stories and have their characters. For me, I've often thought, like, what is the appeal of superheroes and why did superheroes get so big, especially following the turn of the 21st century? I think superheroes represent a mythology. It's kind of that American mythology. When you look at mythological characters, they're always extraordinary. They always have abilities. They're always representative of archetypes. And the superhero genre is, in a way, that open door for what the post-20th century, post-World War II world, kind of what the superhuman archetypical hero would look like put into these more modern settings. And so when you look at characters like Captain America, that's a very Herculean character, right? When you look at Batman, that falls under the Robin Hood archetype of helping the street level, the poor, the downtrodden, right? And superheroes have always kind of filled that archetypical desire of storytelling for me personally. They've always represented a mythology that I was always very interested in, and they've always done a good job of keeping these heroes interconnected to make it feel like a mythos. This is why I think certain superheroes are kind of the fantastical genre with standalone heroes tends to fail compared to these kind of connected universes is because these characters work well as a pantheon of characters. So that's the appeal to me. It's very mythological.
Yeah, I would say I would probably divulge on that too. I do agree with you on the fact that like when you have a pantheon of characters, it opens up the possibility for like just about anything you can imagine in storytelling, and it also gives relatability to, you know, if you have like people like the Justice League, you can also relate it in some sense to like the Greek gods because some of them are taken like the inspiration's taken directly from it. I mean, Wonder Woman is a descendant of the Greek gods. She lives on an island that is modeled after a completely female civilization that is still back in the times of the Greek era. Where I would say I would divulge because I think it works in not only a pantheon perspective, but I think it works on just a solo perspective. Because if you think about it, right, would take Spider-Man for an example. When Spider-Man was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, he was designed to be the most relatable, weird, out there, outlandish character. And the reason it worked was because it wasn't anymore, we have a setting of, oh, well, this guy is, you know, he's the modern interpretation of, like, Ares, or he's the modern interpretation of Odysseus. You know, he is, at his core fundamental principles, a flawed human being that cannot seem to balance his superhero responsibilities with his normal responsibilities. And that's why Spider-Man is the most, as far as Marvel to date, the most popular character, because he has the most amount of relatability and he has the most amount of instances of the human struggle. And I think that's what makes a great storyline, because if you can put people in a storyline, you can put objects in a storyline and make it seem believable and relatable, that's amazing. But as soon as you put in the human experience, it adds this level of like connectedness between the reader and the author that I don't think is there for a lot of other movies, especially within the last 10 years. So that's what I would say, is that like it works no matter where it is. It just depends on who the author is and how much they're able to relate this to the human experience.
We are going to touch up on the last 10 years because I do have a question kind of semi-pertaining to that, and that's where I feel like it might really start taking off. So it's interesting to see your guys' perspectives on the superhero genre. When I was growing up, I never saw anything like this at all. I thought it was completely bombastic and nonsense. It wasn't until I was mostly an adult that I started figuring out, wait, there's actually more of a mythos to what superheroes represent. It is the modern legends of today's society. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like I will touch up on what you guys were saying earlier.
Yeah.
It is the unhingingness of it. Like there are no borders. It's let your imagination run wild, but how does it still connect to the everyday person?
Yeah,
right?
It's the relation of the human struggle.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that you bring up the stories of today and how it didn't really impact you when you were an adult, or until you were an adult. I think that the turning point for superheroes and the superhero boom was, and this is kind of ironic because we're talking about mythology and kind of the bombasticism, it was the groundedness of the Dark Knight trilogy that I'm sure we'll get into more, that really brought this idea that superheroes are the ways in which you can tell a mythological, grandiose tale in a grounded world, right? You can tell those archetypical stories in a way that appeals to the modern man. And I think that especially The Dark Knight, like that middle of the trilogy, that was the post 9/11 myth. That was the idea of how do we live in the world post 9/11 with government surveillance and with terrorism and these really mature subjects, but telling it through the lens of the archetypical Robin Hood character of the modern era, which was Batman. So that's, I think, where this kind of appeal began hitting people. I know it's where it really started getting deep for me. And by then, gosh, I don't remember what year it came out. It must have been like 2010, 2011. By then, I was deep in my teenage years. I was getting closer to adulthood, so.
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing before I move on. I agree with you on that because it's particularly 2008 in particular, at least for me, is kind of like the flashpoint of the dawn of the modern superhero in cinema, and kind of like the first real interpretations and real struggles and real stonewall obstacles that need to be overcome by these heroes that are being plucked from the comics and putting into a live action setting. Dark Knight came out in 2008, but what other movie came out in 2008 that was also a superhero movie? Iron Man. And when Iron Man came out, it was the inception of, oh, wait a minute, we can take an entirely obscure character, even though he has relatable struggles and stuff, we can take this reality of a crazy character that couldn't exist in the modern sense. Technology is not even close to being where this is at. We don't even know if it would work, but putting it in a movie sense and making it work. That, for me, like, between The Dark Knight and Iron Man, kind of like started that modern road to, okay, this is how we're going to do superhero movies. Because Jon Favreau is, at least in my opinion, as far as the beginning of the Iron Man movies and the beginning of the Marvel movies, are masterpieces as far as, like, taking a Hollywood 20th Century Fox giant bigwig surface with all of these people that are fighting and clamoring to be able to get a budget out and trying to put money anywhere that they can to be able to get a return profit, past all of that, making good storytelling in movies.
Right. And that, I do want to get into the movie subject a little bit later here. I do want to actually start moving into my first question, or actually now it would be second.
Heckin' yeah, dude.
That I have written down here. So, both DC and Marvel, which has the better presentation of their in-universe characters, and which of these characters have the best portrayal overall? Any media format. Doesn't matter if it's the games, movies, comics, you name it. Who is your number one hero or villain, and why do they present their brand the best?
Oh my god.
This is actually not too difficult. This is not too difficult. In terms of the best presented, are we talking hero or brand? Like, overall? Do you want to know, like, what is the better brand in its presentation, or who's the best hero?
Who's the best hero within the brand?
Okay, so between the two brands, in terms of who presents their characters better, it has to be Marvel. Over the course of at least the last 20, 25 years, it has to be Marvel. And I think the MCU speaks for itself. The video games speak for themselves. But the best character is easily Batman. And again, the movies speak for themselves. The games speak for themselves. It's quite interesting where, as an overall brand, Marvel clearly tops DC in almost every area. Maybe except for comics. I would have to give comics to DC, but the comics, surprisingly enough, is now the smallest of the industries with superheroes. So, in terms of just broad scale, the most popular heroes, the most popular brand, the best presentation, the best actors, Marvel has it beat by a mile. But consistently, Batman has the best product in each individual area. He has the best comics. He has the best games with the Arkham games. He has the best movies between the Dark Knight trilogy, the new Batman movie, even the spin-offs of the Joker movie is just exceptional cinema. So I'd have to give full credit to Marvel as a brand, but Batman is the pinnacle 21st century superhero to me. He is the peak of superheroes.
Yeah, I would say on my part, I definitely agree with about 95% of everything that you're saying, Drake, because it really is true. And here's how I'll break it down. Marvel and DC both excel in two different areas, and both are unbeatable in these two different distinct areas, and neither of them have ever come close in any of these two areas as far as competing. Marvel, on their big budget blockbuster movies, has mopped the floor with DC for nearly a decade now. It's not even like debatable. They have been on a roll since 2008. They've never slowed down. They only slowed down after Endgame. Everything after Endgame, at least for me, besides like No Way Home for Spider-Man, which was like a giant fan service movie, which I love. Everything after that was complete and utter garbage. here's the thing. DC has been trying to ride the coattails of Marvel in the big cinema business and the big A-list budget, giant blockbuster movie screen thing since after The Dark Knight came out. The Dark Knight is the definitive superhero movie, at least like I think of our age. It does the best in showing a fallen and broken hero in one of the craziest, unstoppable force meets immovable object like theories of all time in movies. But that was Christopher Nolan. And we all know that if you throw Christopher Nolan something, it's like throwing Joe Montana a pass in like the 80s when the 49ers were dominating everywhere. It's like you're going to be guaranteed a good movie no matter what. But after that, I mean, it's just been a continual process of catch up for DC to try and match what Marvel has been doing. And I think the main problem that I have is because they're trying to be Marvel. They want to be Marvel. If you watch Batman v Superman, if you watch, what is it? Man of Steel, if you watch the Justice League, like all of them are trying so desperately to recreate Marvel's lightning in a bottle. And they can't do it because DC is fundamentally a different form of environment and thematic elements as opposed to Marvel. They both have dark storylines, but DC is in a completely different scape, and they're trying to be that. Now, I'll end this with saying Marvel has the big budget blockbuster hands down, but DC has held down the small screen and the animated TV series screen forever. There has almost never been a series that I can think of that Marvel's produced that is even on the level, the base level of what DC has done in terms of their shows. I just got finished watching, Green Lantern came out in 2011 with Ryan Reynolds. They made an animated series. Bruce Timm executive produced it like he did with all the other animated series, except this one was fully CGI animated. Absolutely amazing, great storytelling. Just another knockout of the park for a series that was canceled like halfway through its development run. It got 2 seasons and was done. Every single series that DC has come out with like the exception of a few, have been amazing. They dominate that space, and Marvel dominates the big movie space. And I think both of them, more on DC, are trying to get to the level of Marvel. But if they want to get to the level of Marvel, they need to stop trying to be Marvel, and they need to understand what makes their characters fundamentally their characters. And if they don't get that, we're going to have Batman v Superman all over again.
I can go off of so much of what you said, but one thing, first of all, huge shout out DC Animation. Like, I totally forgot that. Their animated movies, their shows are on a whole other level. They are...
Bro, Justice League Animated 2000, Batman Beyond, Unlimited.
Batman Beyond for me.
Dude,
that's the best one.
All the animated movies, man. Superman Red Sun was sick. That was a great one.
My God, yeah.
Was it Apocalypse Dark War? Or, gosh, what was it called? Apocalypse War, right?
Yeah, they just did, they kind of did their animated movie straight to release version of Endgame, and it was that.
It was so hardcore. It was so brutal.
Dude, I definitely looked at that and I was kind of like, we've skewed a couple things and we're trying to be like ultra dystopian, and like DC's already got that in the bag as far as dystopian futures. But I mean, just a testament to DC's writing. They're playing 4D chess at all times when they write these storylines. There's a comic historian on YouTube. I'm going to send you both of you this video. The Injustice storyline.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh my God, it's dude!
So
one of the greatest chess piece comic book storyline tellings in actual history. It's got some of the best scenarios with the best trump cards, with the best back and forth, best dialogue, crazy situations. It's one of my favorite storylines ever, and if DC makes a movie out of it right now with their current producers and executives trying to get a cash grab for it, I'm gonna kill somebody.
Okay, so I can wrap this kind of back around to how we started talking about mythology, right? Marvel's been very good with creating characters that are relatable. The appeal of Captain America to me was always, I want to be the guy who can jump on the grenade. He is a way for me to embody my virtues and values on the cinema screen, and I love seeing them play out in different scenarios. Tony Stark was always like, man, the corruption of money and that will to redemption, we all feel that. They're incredibly relatable characters. DC is much more mythological. their heroes are supposed to be larger than life. They're supposed to be unbelievable. They're supposed to do things like in the comics, Superman is so powerful, he, with the help of a Green Lantern ring, has strapped the Earth to his back and flown it back into like its position in the solar system, like done really crazy crap like that. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That's what DC is. And I agree that in trying to create, say, Man of Steel, it tried to create such a deeply humanized Man of Steel. It forgot that Superman is supposed to be even bigger than us, right? He's supposed to be a Christ archetype. He's supposed to be the ideal that we could never live up to, and that's why we need him. We want to see stories where, rather than wishing we would be Superman, we're supposed to wish that Superman is real.
Oh my God! If you could have hit a nail on the head any more accurate, you would have sent the nail through the board. Like, here's and I think a lot of people, especially, I'll finish off with the Superman thing because I agree with basically everything you just said. The Superman archetype, right? The ultimate being. I think so many people pass him up because, oh, well, he's done before. He has all the powers. He's completely invulnerable. And it's like, yes, but that makes it so much better because now you have to navigate the chessboard of a great storyline, assuming that you've already won. So now you have to navigate outside the box of conventional storytelling. Because if Superman can beat anybody that he comes up against, how do you make a good storyline? And I would point to Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman that came out in the mid-2000s. Superman is in the devil is in the details when you're talking about Superman. Everybody knows that he has super strength, flies, heat vision, super breath, all that stuff. But the devil is in the details. If you want to make a good storytelling, if you want to make a good story about Superman, you have to focus on everything else except his core character strengths.
With that being said, which cinematic universe represents their brand best, and does this mean the quality of these movies are better over the opposition? So you guys actually touched up on
Marvel.
This. Yeah, you guys already kind of touched up on this earlier. Like, Marvel actually has more of a consistent streamline of movies that interwove their entire experience, and it is one big experience. Whereas DC kind of comes out with these solo films, and they tried doing the Justice League, but it didn't really pan out the way I think that they wanted it to.
You don't say.
Especially not the fans. Especially not the fans, dude. Holy mother of God.
Like, DC forgot their roots. But here's the thing, like, my favorite superhero movie of all time is the Dark Knight. That's the thing. Like, I do appreciate Marvel movies, but I love the way Nolan presented Batman. So Batman as a character with Christopher Nolan's style of storytelling was perfect. Those are like an intermarried couple that you couldn't separate. The way he could present Batman, in my opinion, was probably the best for a live action telling.
Oh yeah, 100%.
He rendered it really well. But Marvel has a build up to the Avengers Endgame that I don't even know how DC is going to currently compete with that, because part of the thing with DC heroes and villains is that they are larger than life.
Well, and here's the thing. As far as right now in the modern sense, if DC wanted to compete with Marvel, copy and paste your best comic book storylines, make them series or make them movies. Do not change a single thing. Do not change a single thing. Don't put any of your extra writing in there. Don't put any extra new characters in there.
The book is holy.
Just make the storyline. I swear. All you have to do is copy and paste. You keep the same energy in the dialogue. You keep the same energy in the storytelling. DC would wipe Marvel off the slate now that the Infinity War saga is done. They would wipe Marvel clean if they just focused on good storytelling.
Especially considering like the direction the direction that Marvel's taken as of the last couple of years.
Yeah, I gotta acknowledge
into the dumpster. That's the direction. A plane crash right into a dumpster fire.
Like, all right, we're done with this.
But no, you're right. You're right. DC has the comic game so down. I don't read a lot of comics. I do. Gosh, what's his name? There's a Comics Explained. Comics Explained. I have binge watched his whole channel, and the stories that DC tells are otherworldly good. They are insanely good.
Amazing. Dude.
It's actually insane. If they just took some level of inspiration, which seems to be the problem with every live action adaptation of anything ever, is it's like, hey, try the source material. They're popular for a reason. You're getting to make this show, this movie, for a reason. Because your comics were dope. So let's do the comics. Marvel, for the most part, was pretty good at this, but they were good at also bending and twisting it into their format, which their format worked for a while. They struck gold with a formula, kept the formula, and knocked it out of the park all the way through to Endgame. But again, like you're saying, lightning in a bottle. And guess what? It got stale. Marvel's formula doesn't work anymore. Don't do it. Try something else. So I'm with you. Like DC, if they would lean into their source material, they have better source material than Marvel. The comics are so good in DC.
And here's the thing. Here's how I'll round it off. Watch this. You ready for this? Check this out. Every blunder that Marvel has made, every screw up that they've made in trying to make a better story, they could have just made the original story and it would have been 10 times better, right? Thor Ragnarok, for example. Everybody loves Thor Ragnarok. I don't really care for it. Here's why. Thor Ragnarok tries to combine the Ragnarok storyline with the Planet Hulk storyline.
Yeah.
And why on earth would you ever do that? Why would you do that? If you have read or watched the animated movie of Planet Hulk and then transitioned and read the comics to World War Hulk, it is almost a travesty to be able to say that they tried to put this in the same movie. Same thing with Batman v Superman, right? Batman v Superman deals with Doomsday. Superman Doomsday is one of the greatest, craziest comics that has ever been put out by DC. On top of that, Batman v Superman, that comes from the Dark Knight Returns series with Frank Miller, when Batman finally went up against Superman and beat the shit out of him. So, like, if you just make the original stories, makes everything so much better. If you don't do it, you get what you have now.
I've always been upset in terms of a comic that was not done well into a movie with, and gosh, because this is one of the most popular movies in all of the MCU, and is Captain America Civil War. My first comic ever, my first comic series, I got in like a singular edition, all of the comics for the Civil War. And I used to binge it as a kid. I would sit in the car and I would just read this comic of Marvel Civil War over and over, and it was so good. And then they did, I don't know if you ever played the Ultimate Alliance games, but there was a Marvel...
Yes.
Yeah, those games slapped. And Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 was about Civil War, and they did the comic. And I was just like, it was so cool, man. It was all really good. And then they did Civil War in movie format, and I get it. There was no way you could have built into it, right? With what they were doing with the MCU. They did really well for what they had. I was just insulted that it was called Civil War and compared to the comic. I was like, no. The comic is absolutely off the hook. But obviously, like, the comic has the X-Men and it has this whole build-up with Spider-Man and Tony Stark that you can't do. So I get it, but when it comes to DC, it's clear that DC is very willing to just say, hey, here's all our heroes. Like, if you look at the Justice League movie, they're like, here's 3 or 4 new heroes. You know who they are. Why? Because we're DC. You know who Wonder Woman is. Like, we don't need to beat around the bush here. So if you already have that, go nuts, dude. Like, we know who these heroes are, and DC has that advantage over Marvel. I guess now they don't, because everyone knows who these Marvel heroes are. But Marvel always had the disadvantage of, like, no one gave a crap about Iron Man who wasn't an Iron Man fan. Same with Thor. They had to build those up. Everybody and their brother and their mother and their father knows who Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and the Flash are. No introduction
without
needed.
A doubt, without hesitation.
So, yeah, I can't grasp DC needing to do what Marvel did. Just make great stinking movies. This is why their animated stuff is so good. They'll just take a comic, they'll go right out of the pages of the comic, yeah, and they'll just be like, hey, here you go, here's the comic in movie format. And guess what? You know all the heroes, they're in a different scenario. All you need to know is the scenario because you know the heroes. They're DC.
The people that are helping to produce and direct the current content that you're seeing out of DC and Marvel, I very much question what they say they're fans on the cameras and when they're producing these movies, but are you? That's the thing. Like, the work that you're putting out doesn't reflect that.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Not even for a second. That's what I'm saying, man. Copy and paste. That's all you got to do. Dude, what the, how would you feel if you were doing grade school homework when you were still 10 years old and they were like, we'll pay you $10 million if you do this word for word? We'll just pay you $10 million. We'll do it right now. Just make it word for word. It'll turn into a blockbuster franchise. Just copy and paste. Dude, anybody would do that. Anybody would do that. What are you talking about? Oh, I have to reinvent the wheel because, it's already been done before. Yeah, it's already been done before. It's been in a comic format. You know how many people read comics? Not even close to the amount of people that watch movies.
No.
What are you talking about? Oh, well, it needs to be reinvented. It needs to be for a modern opera. It needs to be for a modern opera.
There is, and this kind of gets back into the Halo show that we talked about, but there is a reality for these people who spend their careers making TV and movies. There is a wisdom to it, and that works sometimes, and other times it doesn't work. Because comics aren't movies, and the adaptation of comics to movies, I want to be fair to say I don't make movies, right? There is a general wisdom to making movies that these people try to apply. This is what they did with the Halo show. This is why Master Chief doesn't have his helmet in the Halo show a bunch, because that goes against traditional wisdom. But when you watch these animated movies, and you realize that they effing slap, that they are the peak of movies for superheroes.
The thing is with Master Chief taking off his helmet, oh gosh, I got a mixed feeling on that because Mandalorian was able to hold out.
Okay, so
removing the helmet.
Hear me out. I'm bringing this full circle. My brother. So when we see the traditional wisdom thrown out, we have seen great success in the adaptation of these mediums. For example, The Mandalorian. It was right around the corner. The Mandalorian took this traditional wisdom of you can't have a faceless character for a full season of TV, flipped it the bird and made 2 great seasons out of it. He took his helmet off for a grand total of probably 3 minutes of screen time across 2 seasons of television. When you look at things like the animated movies for DC, they don't follow the traditional wisdom of movies, and they slap. They are great. Fanboys go, they clearly hate the source material, and they don't like the fans, and they don't like me, and they take it personally. No, it's because you have 2 mediums, and you are adapting a medium. You are trying to apply the wisdom of one medium into the adaptation, when what should happen is you should transition your wisdom. You should say, okay, the wisdom of comic books must now be applied to the movie screen, instead of saying, I am going to apply movie wisdom into this comic book. Because what happens is you ruin what made the great comic story good to begin with, and you have nothing. So I think it is a fundamental misunderstanding of how to transition stories across mediums. And the best way to do it is, frankly, to stop trying so hard to transition it and just do it.
Just make a storyline. Make a storyline. Do it. Make a storyline. Oh my god. You know what I'm saying? And here's my thing. I'm still gonna hold a little bit of anime towards it because I think there is a distinction between the people that claim themselves to be the elite class of society versus the people that are, middle class to lower class, that are in the lower tax brackets. And oh, well, you don't live the lifestyle that I do. So, I probably know better because I've made $3.4 million last fiscal year. So I don't know what you've been doing, but it's that mixed on top of the just what's a movie? Why don't we just plug it in here? You put that in there, you go to budget, and boom, there you go. There's the movie. And it's it's what you said, Drake. It's trying to apply a practical movie sense into an impractical movie. And it's you have to be able to get outside of these bars. Also, Giant movie studios, if you're ever listening to this, you need to give your CGI artist more time before the deadline hits. You know why? Because you just had The Flash come out. Look how well that did. Look how great of a DC storyline that was. Go look at the CGI in that movie. Great job.
So I can touch up on that a little bit too. Like, you cannot sell bad CGI to a movie that I have to go out and pay for in the theater.
That you have to imagine is real.
Yeah, it works on YouTube, right? I know what my audience is. I'm watching a YouTube video. I know it's like probably just a small band of people making this form of content.
Yeah.
When you have a multi-million-dollar budget to make a piece of content, there's an expectation set, right? And those expectations have to be met. And your audience doesn't lie. They know what they're looking at. They know when things start to look cheap, feel cheap, act cheap. It doesn't work. And now that you have the audacity to have people go out and pay money, hard-earned money, which is kind of irresponsible in my opinion, right? Like, it's like you're trying to set on a play and you didn't prepare for it. Like, none of the actors have actually practiced their lines and whatnot. That's what cheap CGI feels like in a movie.
Jimmy, go be the damsel in distress over there, okay?
Yeah, I don't blame the artist necessarily. Like, there's been a couple of articles been put out, like Marvel CGI artists have been astronomically overworked for the amount of pay that they've been receiving.
Of course.
She-Hulk was a hard testament to that.
That She-Hulk is the perfect example of what Connor was saying with a bunch of elitists thinking that you should watch this content. We know you like superheroes. Well, this is what you superhero nerds should be watching and liking. That is the example of that.
Superhero, so you should probably watch that.
The twerking scene, man! What is that? What is that? It's awful! It's the worst piece of content I have quite literally and mind you, I saw Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but that She-Hulk twerk scene was the single worst piece of content I have ever seen that is even remotely related to a superhero.
Controversial hot take. Best part in Multiverse of Madness is when everybody died.
I don't see that as hot. That is the iciest, coldest take. That movie is quite literally why. It is quite literally why I stopped watching MCU movies.
It sounds like you just got out of Baskin Robbins there, Connor. It's very clear, because the next question that I did have here was, are the cinematic universes heading in a good direction as of 2024? Why do you believe it's heading in the direction that it is going? It seems we've touched up on a very good amount of that.
I've got it. No, I've got it. I have so much to say on this.
I'm gonna unleash if I take it.
I have so much to say because, first of all, Marvel is officially dead, and I'm the biggest Marvel fanboy 100%. I know. The Marvel MCU, it's done. Okay, I'm not going back to it. I'm not hoping it recovers. I don't really care what they do. I haven't seen a movie since Multiverse of Madness, and from what I've seen, they've all been flops since. The truth is that since Endgame, without a clear direction, despite having source material they could go on, it all just fell off, man. And I hope there's a great YouTube documentary in a couple years explaining everything that went on behind the scenes where it all fell off. But I am so excited for James Gunn and the DC universe that is coming up.
Yeah, dude.
James Gunn has released one of two. There are only since Endgame 2 good Marvel movies. And that was Spider-Man, No Way Home, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3. James Gunn hit all 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies out of the park. He did great on all of them. And I really feel like, and you get this vibe from Guardians of the Galaxy, the amount of care he has. He cares so much about these characters that are under his wing that he's invested in, and to give that level of care and that Guardians of the Galaxy type, I don't really know how to word it, but to give that over to a guy like James Gunn is just such a brilliant decision. And I am very, very excited because, in all honesty, if I had to pick a set of superheroes to get movies out of for the rest of my life, it would probably be DC, because I like DC heroes better. And to give James Gunn control of that franchise, I'm just so excited. So I have to say DC is doing brilliant in terms of their current setup for the future, and Marvel is legitimately the worst train wreck in cinema I have seen. It's worse than Star Wars. It is worse than the sequel trilogies by a mile. It is worse.
A large margin.
Yeah.
Very large margin. I don't remember the last time I enjoyed going out to see a Marvel film other than Endgame. Well, no,
I mean, even Endgame, they nerfed Hulk, and I was done.
No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, No Way Home.
I loved Endgame. I loved Endgame. I'll stand up for it in this crowd. Endgame was great. It was great.
Well,
between Infinity War and Endgame, Infinity War is like a maelstrom of craziness. And I love the fact that it's like finally we get a movie where the villain is literally unstoppable. I love it.
But I don't want to leave you hanging high and dry here, Drake. Like, go ahead and explain to us, like, why do you feel like Endgame is the one? Why is that the one for you? Because, like, I know you're articulate with your arguments. You believe in the things that you believe for a reason. Give it to me. Like, what about Endgame puts it over Infinity War for you?
I never said that. I want to be clear about that. I think that there are two very different movies. I want to make that clear. I think you're comparing an apple to an orange in that regard. Infinity War, in terms of an action superhero cinema film, is superior to Endgame.
Okay, so it sounds like you're just like more or less like you just genuinely think that
I think Endgame's great.
Was a good movie and that it didn't receive the recognition that it should have.
Okay, let me say this. Let me take the conversation this direction. Since Endgame came out, so when Endgame came out, it was the highest rated on Rotten Tomato for both fans and critics. It is currently the second highest grossing movie of all time, and it did beat Avatar for a while. So I'm not saying over here like the highest grossing movie of all time with great critical reviews is so underrated. That's not what I'm saying. But I have noticed that as the MCU has gone downhill and that fandom has subsided and that energy has subsided, that there is a much more critical lens by which Endgame is viewed through. And I don't think that's fair because I think that neglects what Endgame is and what it was to the time and place for which it was released. When you look at Infinity War, it is, I think, the best MCU movie just as a movie. There is no movie I can watch where for 2 hours and 45 minutes it feels like 90 minutes because it's nonstop great interactions and just fight choreography and fight scenes and CGI for nearly 3 hours. It's just near perfect in terms of what I want out of a superhero movie. It's the perfect blockbuster superhero movie. Not the perfect superhero movie, but the perfect blockbuster. But what Endgame was, hold on, let me finish the thought. What Endgame was as somebody who in 2008, from the point of Iron Man, was ridiculously invested in the MCU and loved even its failures, was invested in its failures. Endgame was the perfect movie for me. It was made for me, for me, and for people like me. It was for a decade of movies. It was intended to be a celebration of a decade of movies. It was fan service for a decade of movies, and it did that in a way that culminated 10 years of films in a way that I was incredibly satisfied with. So as a fan of the MCU, I think Endgame is not just good, I think it's the second best movie in the MCU for me personally as an MCU fan. But if we're talking about like quality of film, it's I'm gonna bleep this out. As a cinema movie, it's a cluster. Like it's a very bizarre cluster of a movie where they're like, oh, here's a super sad first act with a bunch of character development, but just kidding, we're time traveling, we're all over the place, and now this bad guy is coming all the way from this other timeline, and now everybody's fighting, and we brought them all back from the dead, and now everybody's alive and snapped away, and there's a funeral, and you're like, Wait, what? That's a movie?
Yeah, that's exactly the way that you just described it. Perfectly encapsulates like the way I was feeling when I first watched the movie. But when I was in the movie theater, I remember Endgame's audience. I remember the
That's true.
quintessential moments where people were actually getting out of their seat and screaming at the top of their lungs at the movie screen. I've never been in a cinema experience where everybody in the theater goes wild when Captain America catches Thor's hammer. We are never going to get that again.
I still look up videos. I still look up videos of theaters of people like going crazy like it's an arena.
The audience reaction channel is just like crazy.
It's
Chills.
a reflection. It's like what you were saying. It's a reflection of the last decade of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's a celebration. So when you finally see like some of those elements come to fruition and are rendered on the screen, it's like, oh my gosh, the moment we've been all waiting for years. For years, because we knew he was able to pick it up. But it's also like the moment for the pickup and the presentation, like it's like a pivotal moment where we wouldn't have expected. We were like too connected to like, is he about to finish Thor? Is Thanos about to finish Thor? And then Captain America saves him with his own hammer.
Yeah.
It's like that was like you could not have timed that moment more perfect than that.
Yeah. And I will give Endgame its props as far as being the cherry on top to one of the greatest feats of like human idealism as far as storytelling and cinema and cinematography and big movie productions go. It's the only one to exist as far as I'm concerned. It's the only franchise ever to be able to be this expansive, to be able to have this many facets of all their different characters, and to be able to bring them in for one of the craziest crescendos I've ever seen. With that said, Marvel, I hate what you did to Hulk. I don't know why you made him underpowered. If you looked at the Ultimate Comics, which you got all of your inspiration from, mind you, go watch, anybody that's watching this, go watch the Marvel animated movie that came out in like 2005, 2006, Ultimate Avengers. Watch the movie and tell me that it's not an exact carbon copy of the script for the first Avengers movie in 2012. It is. And also, they did it right in the animated movie because Hulk, after the entire battle of them defeating an entire alien race, which is, guess what, the Chitauri, same one in the 2012 live-action movie, crazy shocker there. Hulk goes on a rampage and nearly destroys, like, most of the city and all of the Avengers at that time. That's why I wish Hulk was not nerfed, because he is the truest definition of uncontrolled chaos, and I don't know why you didn't use that more in your storytelling.
So, my next question for you guys, because I do agree with the way that you have been talking about the cinematic universe. It's a real big disappointment the direction Marvel's gone. I don't know if it's a Disney thing. I don't know like why they had it going the direction that it did. I don't know what
you just let me direct the franchise. I'd be so much better.
I just wonder what studio executive thought that any of what they're doing right now is a good idea. But I think they need to get a clue. There's an oversaturation of nerds on the market. People are not just watching your movies. They're going home and watching YouTube videos about the movies.
Yeah, and it's like,
that's the thing.
It's such an oversaturated market that now the entire scape of moviegoers are clamoring for authenticity. Yeah. They're clamoring for actually good stories. You can't keep doing a cash grab. People are just going to stop coming.
There's a lot more nerds on the market right now. And, nerds will pick you apart. And I think it's imperative now more than ever that you actually go home, do your homework before you write the script.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the fault of content oversaturation. We're only going to take the best of the best. We have too many options to just say, I'm just going to go see a Marvel movie.
So I want to lean into a different subject here.
Oh, subject change.
And here's my next question. Mm-hmm. I'll just come out with it. Which of the two universes render a better dichotomy between the hero versus their nemesis? Why are the natures and themes of these so interesting over the opposition?
They all suck. I'm not going to pick either one. DC has in their expanded in their cinematic universe, they all suck. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they have one good villain. One. in like 20 something movies. So I'm not picking either, but what I will say is that DC just generally has better villains. Their villains like slap, especially Batman's, and there are more DC movies with better villains. That is true. But in terms of like how either one uses their villains in film, they suck. How do they use their villains in video games? Arkham's pretty good. I still think Arkham actually kind of isn't great with its villains because they're more of a boss, except for the Joker. He's actually kind of a story villain, but it's been a while, so I could be not giving it enough credit. The Spider-Man games have pretty good villains, actually. I like how it does its villains. Just generally speaking, superhero villains are not very good because they're kind of cheesy.
I agree with you. I just feel like there's no effort into making them better, though. There's like zero effort put into it. Marvel, for the most part, there's only ever been one good villain. You're right, and it's Thanos.
But he was so good, man. He was so good.
I just wish Marvel would take the villains from the comic book universe and would actually like, if they weren't good in the comics, because I haven't read them, right? So I'm not imposing an opinion there, right?
Yeah.
But what I am trying to communicate here is, I wish they could have fleshed out their villain characters a little bit more to be impactful in the storytelling process.
Yeah.
Versus DC, it seems like every villain Batman has is a reflection of a certain aspect of Batman himself, right? One of my favorite villains is not the Joker, it's Slade.
Slade is so
one of
good.
my favorite villains because
sick.
he's calculated, he's strong, he is on par of Batman's physique and martial arts talent.
He's trained by the same people.
But his ideologies are different than Batman, which to me that's so interesting that he can maintain those same disciplines that Bruce Wayne can hold, but his outtake is 180 degree of what Bruce's outtake is.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then, the Joker, which is like letting the corruption get to your head and just taking it out on the world.
Well, and I was going to say, like we're talking about like the dichotomies of great heroes versus great villains.
Yeah.
You can have a good storyline with moderate characters, moderate villains. But if you want to have a great storyline, there needs to be a relationship between and a cultivation of both the protagonist and the antagonist. If you have nothing for either one of them, or if one of them is underdeveloped, you are always going to be playing a game of catch-up to try and rewrite your mistakes, because the secret, at least to me, for creating a good story is a good villain. Yeah. If you have a good villain, you're going to have an amazing story. That's why, at least for me, it's DC. Because Batman and the Joker are the blueprint for a great hero going against a great villain. You know what I'm saying? Because it's Batman is not true justice. He's flawed justice. In a lot of instances where, we'd be like, well, the Joker's killed like 3,000 people. Why don't you just kill the Joker? He doesn't want to. Well, in our flawed version of morality, we'd kill him anyway. Because we're not letting you kill 3,000 people. It's not happening. But Batman works on almost a psychotic break of what he thinks justice is. It's not real justice, because if it was real justice, you just let somebody kill 3,000 people, throw them back in prison only for them to break out like 2 days later. That would never work in the real sense. So it's a flawed form of justice, but still a human version of justice that could happen under really dire circumstances, like losing your parents, against the ultimate A for effort version of trying to corrupt somebody with your version of evil. The entire reason the Joker exists is because his main goal is to bring Batman to the other side. If he can do that, he doesn't realize it, but if he can do that, he'll have completed his entire life's journey, but he'll also defeat his own story, because now he has no antithesis to go against. It's kind of the same thing with Batman. It's what keeps them in alignment. It's what makes the good stories between them, is because it's one side fighting against the other side that is doing the exact same thing. They're both fighting for the same purpose on both of their ideological sides, and together it makes great storytelling.
I think this reflects that one of the strongest scenes of those final two Avengers movies is whenever Thanos, with all of his Infinity Stones, almost all of them, confronts the lone Tony Stark and refers to him by name. Yep. And he goes, I know who you are, right? And they have that interaction. And in that moment, you kind of see that Tony is looking in a very corrupted mirror for just a moment, and it bothers him. It deeply bothers him. Every time Batman looks at the Joker, he is looking at a deeply corrupted mirror. And you're right when you say relationship. There's very, very few good relationships between heroes and villains in the comics because the villains are campy. Like, that's kind of the issue with comic villains, is they're often very, very campy. Not so much in DC, actually, because I was going to touch on this.
DC,
like
DC goes
everything matters.
Balls to the wall in terms of trying to stretch their characters.
I was going to touch on this all the way back when we were talking about good Superman. The reason Lex Luthor is the perfect Superman villain is because Superman is supposed to represent something so far beyond us, so above us, that we desire his existence and his assistance. Like, we look at Superman as our savior. He is a Christological figure in that sense. He's messianic. And anytime you have a messianic character, someone who's supposed to deliver humanity, his greatest enemy is the corruption of humanity. And Lex Luthor always represented the evil, insidious, corrupted man. The man who has the brains and the powers and uses it to end ultimate good. So it's always been that relationship between Superman and Lex Luthor was an ideal so far above humanity that we strive for versus our fallen nature. That is the power of Lex Luthor versus Superman. And DC does that with all its villains in some regard. It has always done a very good job of that. As to where Marvel, like Spider-Man, Green Goblin, it's always been like, that's my best friend's dad. Oh no. It's like, he killed my girlfriend. It's like, yeah, you kind of like know each other. That's great. But
I guess
Uncle Ben.
But it's never been like Green Goblin has, despite the fact he's iconic and has done many things, like it's never been Green Goblin and Spider-Man. I've never really felt that. It's always been like, oh, Green Goblin's kind of cool. And when I think of Spider-Man, I don't think of Green Goblin. When I think of Batman, the next thing I think of is the Joker. That's how it should be with your antagonist.
Yeah, and I would say, like, going back to like the All-Star Superman comics, right? When you were talking about Lex Luthor versus Superman, the guy that is supposed to deliver humanity, you know, to show us the better path, to be the leader and lift us up off of our immoral pedestal and give us a greater ideal to strive for. Lex Luthor, I think it's really crazy because if you read the All-Star comics and also watch the animated movie, Lex Luthor is that flawed human being that is corrupted, that does seek to bring down this god and make him bleed, because he doesn't like the fact that humanity is not leading this race to ultimate civilization. It's some other alien that is completely beyond his scope of understanding. But the other thing that I would say, and this is why I like the Grant Morrison comic, is because they portray Luthor as, of course, a vicious killer. Somebody who is incredibly corrupt, that will do anything that he can to be able to get one over on Superman, but also this strange preservation for humanity. He values humanity in almost like a shepherd would value his flock. And in that storyline, he gains the ability of Superman's powers for a 24-hour period. And in that, he starts realizing why Superman is so restrained in himself and doesn't fix all of the world's problems at once, because he starts seeing particles moving through the air. He starts seeing the construction of atoms as he's just walking around Metropolis because of these powers. And he realizes, he's like, I could save all of you. I could cure any known disease. I could do anything that I wanted as far as perfecting the human race. But I can't, because these powers are not mine, and also, like, if I were to do all of this, I would fundamentally change the world, possibly not for the better. And Superman basically says, he was like, there is a reason why I stay in my lane. There's a reason why I still protect the people of this city in the way that I do, because you'll get there eventually, but to be able to take all of these things and shove them into the human experience all at once, it would corrupt them entirely. Because as soon as you get a handle on this type of information, it's over. Because we're all flawed human beings. As soon as something that is presented as monumental in terms of a change to civilization, anybody that has a moral soul that is decently far from being a good person is going to seek to corrupt it. That's why Superman is who he is, because he is incorruptible in the canon comic sense. And Injustice, it's a...
Oh, Injustice is so good, man. Oh, it's so good.
Telling him about that, I was like, dude, you
It's
need to
so good. Yeah, Injustice is a whole nother ballpark on storytelling, man.
Oh my God, the ultimate, like, put down your card, and I got my trump card, and then he's like, now I've got an even bigger trump card, and dude's like, I got a hammer, and just, like, starts beating people with it. It's just one of, like, dude, especially, I'll spoil it for the people in the audience for a little bit. If you don't like it, click off for, like, 2 minutes. Superman fights the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps. He fights the entire Green Lantern Corps, including Mogo, which is a Green Lantern in the living body of a planet. And not only that, he fights every single one of the Guardians, including Ganthet, and beats him holistically. And then nearly dies, gains the power of the Yellow Ring of Fear, and wipes them off the map. And it's just, it's the greatest example of obstacle, immovable object. Obstacle, immovable object. And just completely getting through those barriers. DC executives, don't you ever think about making a story until I get over there. Don't do it. Don't do it. Daddy needs to be able to tell you what you need to do. Because if you try and do this whole Wall Street gambling bet of a cash grab, which was Batman v Superman, I'm going to lose it. I don't like you guys. Just let me get in there. I'll do it all by myself. I'll learn how to code, whatever. Just leave it to me, because you're going to ruin the storyline. I guarantee it.
Listen off, Daddy. Knock it off.
It's awful about it.
Don't piss off Daddy.
Don't anchor Daddy, okay?
Gotta wait till Daddy gets home so he can make things right.
Yeah, you're gonna let me create a storyline, okay? You're gonna leave this to me.
All right, so I'll move on to my last question, because what you guys did over here was like really hit home about the relationships between the heroes and their villains. Like that, to me, that's why Batman's my favorite. I do like Terry McGinnis, but like his villains are super campy up until Joker comes up on the scene in the movie.
I mean, I would argue, I'm sorry, I love the series to death, and the character examinations that they have in the show between like Shriek or I can't remember or Gollum or what is it? Oh, God.
Radiation.
Yeah, who is that? It's Wayne Powers, but I can't remember his like Blight. And dude, if you want to reinvent the wheel, what a way to do it. And I think it's even better because these characters are all really dark, and I love it.
We've discussed this before. I think if they resurrected that TV show 1-to-1, do the modern CGI, I would rather it actually be modern CGI and not live action. Do it the way that the Arkham series games did their trailers, especially for Arkham Origins.
Cinematic.
Everybody would watch it.
Throw it in Unreal Engine.
I think that there is a market for 3D films, and it's untouched. I mean, yeah, I think DC, as of its current rate, has a lot more potential than Marvel. Marvel has exercised its muscle. I think DC should be the one to now come in and fill the gap that we have in terms of this superhero content in cinema. How do you guys feel that your favorite heroes have? How do you feel that? Oh, sorry, I should really rephrase this.
Oh, you're all good. You're all good.
Do
Take
you
your time.
feel that your favorite heroes have been portrayed by their representative brands to their full potential?
No, not even close. Not even astronomically. Not even in the same dimension of close. No way.
If I'm being honest, I would say no to DC by a mile and a half. Like, I'm with you on that. DC has only ever portrayed Batman well in live action.
But only in Christopher Nolan and maybe Tim Burton. That's all I would say.
Yeah, but that's more than the rest of the Justice League is all I'm saying.
That is true. That
I'm
is
saying
true.
They've at least done it well. But
yeah, that's true.
Marvel, I would say yeah for the most part. I think it really, really botched Hulk. I think anybody who cares about Hulk knows how hard they botched Hulk. But considering how many heroes they introduced, I think they've actually done a really, really good job of living up to their live action potential. I don't think they could have done the characters of Captain America and Iron Man any better. Like, they are, I don't want them any differently than was presented to me. I think Marvel has done 3 iterations of Spider-Man that, despite how bad the movies were for the Amazing Spider-Man series, I like all 3 Spider-Men, how they've been portrayed by their actors in the context of their movies. I like all 3 actors. Yeah, I actually don't have a lot of complaints in Marvel's portrayal of their heroes, and I think for the most part they're comic accurate right up through Endgame. I just think they botched Hulk. Like, botched Hulk. Like, it's really bad what they did to him.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of my gripes come from the latter portion of this entire MCU journey that we've all been on watching through these movies. First Thor, amazing. First Iron Man, amazing. First Captain America, amazing. First Avengers, amazing. Second Captain America, still pretty good.
Oh, don't even give it a pretty good, man. You got to rewatch that thing. Winter Soldier holds up. It holds up.
It's good. I gotta say, it's pretty good.
It's so
and,
good.
Like, it's got
better
some of the
than I
best
remember it.
choreography that I've seen.
Yeah, it's better than I remembered it. I rewatched it, I think, like a year ago, and I was like, yo, why is this so much better than I remember it being? It holds up.
Yeah, I will give Winter Soldier its props simply based on, like, the thing that makes Winter Soldier for me was the sound design mixed with the fight choreography that was in that movie. The initial chase scene where Winter Soldier shoots Nick Fury, and then the chase that ensues, one of the it's like one of the shortest scenes ever, one of the best. And then the fight between Captain America and the Winter Soldier out in the middle of, like, DC in the street scene, and they're just going at it, and it's like very minimalist music, like going towards the end of the fight, towards the end where it's really like they start throwing everything they possibly can at each other on that street scene. Crazy, dude. The knife work for Sebastian Stan, amazing, and like it's some of the best moves and counter moves that I've seen. I will give Winter Soldier props all day long for that. I just really have like a giant hate boner for like all of the stuff that's happened after Endgame. I
for
really
sure.
do.
It's so bad. The MCU after, okay, so I'm probably like in a small camp here. I really liked WandaVision. I thought the ending was mid.
No, that wasn't bad.
I thought it was mid, but I thought it was as an introduction to, hey, we have multiverse now and we're going to do some wacky crap. They're like, let's run through like every era of sitcom in a family that's not really their type of context. I was like, this is wild. Like, this is really wild. I thought it was some of the more unique television I've ever seen, and I was really excited for what Marvel was going to do afterwards in terms of its storytelling. And ever since then, other than No Way Home was this weird, like, here's a golden egg in the middle of a dumpster fire, like an untouchable golden nugget. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I was like, wow, it's exceptional. But then
we found the needle in the haystack pretty early. We can just go away with it now.
That's exactly what that was. Yes. And then everything other than WandaVision and No Way Home has been worse than I ever could have imagined it becoming. Like, it's been so bad. The She-Hulk twerk scene is a thing! That's canon!
Loki, I'm sorry, I got disinterested. I'm sorry.
They don't care anymore. They don't care anymore.
Are you actually gonna smoke something with that pipe, or you just
No, I just like it. It's a good prop. It's a good prop.
I'm just a distinguished gentleman. It comes with the package.
Bro, you need to put a green screen so I can like key into like a nice fancy library, like look super sophisticated
with like the Ratatouille music in the background.
Yeah, see?
Here,
We're gonna Popeye.
Yeah, get your asparagus in, you'll be stronger. Is it
Oh,
asparagus that he eats? What's his
I think it's
Calling it
asparagus. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
it is
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel so. I do want to finish this off with how I feel about the full potential reach. I think Marvel has done pretty well for themselves, especially considering that they weren't doing like solo tales. As one conglomerated universe, like one universal hodgepodge in whatever phase Endgame was, right? I don't know the numbers. That is probably peak what they would be capable of doing for cinematic format. DC still can touch up on a lot of potential. Batman is one of my more favorite characters. I was actually looking this up last night. There is way more Batman content than any other DC hero.
Good.
Which it can't.
I love it.
I didn't know.
it.
I didn't know whether or not to like that because I'm a Batman guy, but even I was like, oh man, like I hope like DC's other heroes are not so shallow that you can't tell a good tale with them.
If you want
That's
to
what I
see
started getting worried about.
if you want to see the practical depth that DC can take its other heroes, I recommend I don't know what the actual run is called, but there's the Colored Green Lanterns Corps comic run. That is
Sinestro Corps storyline, bro. Oh my god, bro.
they have
God.
When they have all of the different colored cores. I don't know who wrote it. I don't remember what it's called, but they start introducing all of these different Green Lantern cores with all these other colors, with all of these different emotions. It is some of the coolest superhero storytelling. And if you want to know, like, I didn't like Green Lantern until that. I was like, okay, he's just kind of there. He's probably my third favorite behind Batman and Superman. I love Green Lantern just because of that run. Those characters have great potential, and that was evidence to me of what DC can do.
Oh, dude, and here's the thing. My love for Green Lantern, you know what's crazy is when I first discovered Green Lantern is when I was really, really young, watching the original Justice League animated series that came out in 2000, one of the best across the board, at least for me, the ultimate blueprint and interpretation for how any Justice League content should take from the relationship between the characters, everything. But more particularly for Green Lantern, I always thought Green Lantern was black. I never even knew of Hal Jordan. And the reason why is because the original Justice
Drake's face. I just look over
No,
at
dude,
this
here,
and he's like,
and here's the thing.
I always thought he was white. I couldn't believe there was a black Green Lantern until I saw the animated series. I was like, who's this? Hal Jordan was my Green Lantern.
Dude, that's the thing, is because when people are telling me, dude, well, Hal Jordan is the original Green Lantern. He's the original protector of Earth. I was like, he's not? You don't know who Jon Stewart is? You don't know who Jon Stewart is? And people would be like, who's that? Who's that? I'm like, only one of the craziest, toughest, roughest Green Lanterns to ever exist. He's so cool, and he's what I grew up with. So when I saw they were like, oh, it's Hal Jordan. It's Hal Jordan. It's Hal Jordan. I was like, it's Jon Stewart. Leave me alone. And if you want to do a reboot, Disney, DC, please, for the love of God, do not screw this up. Sorry, not Disney, DC. Do not screw this up. If you reboot this whole franchise, your blueprint needs to be that animated series, and it needs to start with Jon Stewart.
All right, so that just about wraps up my last question. Let me pull out the notes again. You guys really have a deeper understanding of these two comic universes than I do. So, sometimes I kind of couldn't grasp, the Green Lantern thing. I have actually never touched up on anything Green Lantern. So
you need to.
It looks like there's, some content I do need to, go into. But
1 second before you go into that. Do you have HBO?
I do not, but I have a smart TV. so I can.
If you ever get HBO, watch the Green Lantern animated series. Is all I'm gonna say.
Green Lantern's so sick, dude. Green Lantern is so sick.
I'm sick, dude. Oh my god.
Yeah, so I think we've just about touched up on every subject that I wanted to cover in terms of DC versus Marvel. It seems like both of the brands have some work to do. I don't know where Marvel can go, so I'm a little bit more afraid for Marvel than I am for DC. DC looks like it will probably be the future moving forward if it's done correctly, that it doesn't try to copycat its opponent. It needs to recognize what makes DC separated from Marvel and embrace it and go full tilt.
It literally needs to be like, stop doing other people, just do you, sis. That's all. That's all you need to do. Just be